Good morning and welcome to episode number 69 of Business Unusual. And one of our presenters today is one of my mentors that I love to learn from, David Patrick of Wise Webs and High Performance Marketing Bootcamp. And how I met David is one of my fantastic referral partners, Chris Kovac of Riverwatch Beef, as well as he does Kovac Digital, and he's a marketer as well. He connected us, it's been a few years back. And I have thoroughly enjoyed learning from David and am very excited to hear about some of the lessons that he has to share with us today. His area of expertise has been in big retailers and big restaurants, but yet now he has transitioned into working with smaller and growing businesses. So I am very excited to turn things over to you, David, and let's all learn a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendan. I want to show you a picture that I first got in my mind over 30 years ago. And that's kind of what today's all about. If you think about your business as a trend line, it's either flat, it's up, it's down, but there's some kind of trend line in your business. And if you want to change the trajectory of your business, pivot, if you will, then you have to figure out, well, what is that, right? What is that pivot? And this time last year, right, we were 3 months into COVID, and I got a call from a former client of mine, and he was very kind in order to start the conversation by saying, with very concerned, but hey, Dave, how's your business going? And if you think back to St. Patrick's Day a year ago when everything kind of shut down, about a month before St. Patrick's Day, my business partner and I were talking, and we're like, geez, maybe we should be running scared, because if companies are laying off, Jill, the secretary, who'd been there for 30 years, they're not going to be hiring expensive, consultants to come in and help them with their business. But we actually had our best year ever in 2020, and we had our best year ever for a lot of the reasons that when I got this call from my former client, what he was about to say to me. So my former client's name was Tom. He's the CEO of several large companies, and he was calling to kind of ask for some help on a strategic project. And again, he started the conversation by saying, hey, Dave, how's business? Obviously saying it hesitantly and with some empathy. And I said, Tom, knock on wood, I got to tell you, we're having our best year ever. And he immediately says, Dave, I'm not surprised. CEOs need to be talking to you right now about where they're going to be, because they can't get back to where they were pre-COVID. And the smart CEOs are going to be asking those questions. Where do I need to be? And so that's what this chart says. And I'll tell you, the very first time I got this chart in my mind, I was working on the Miller Lite advertising account. And I was based in Chicago, Miller Lite's in Milwaukee. And if you're going to make a 9 a.m. meeting with the brand team of Miller Lite, you got to get up at about 4 in the morning, because you have to drive through the Chicago rush hour traffic and then drive through the Milwaukee rush hour traffic to get to this 9 a.m. meeting. And I'm in this meeting with about 40 people, and they're all the people that work on Miller Lite, the different kind of brand and marketing team members. And Miller Lite was trending about -2% at the time. Great Taste, Less Filling had really driven, as an ad campaign, Miller Lite's success over a lot of years, but it was starting to slow down. Coors Light was the hot beer at the time. Bud Light was stealing market share like crazy. And so Miller Lite was flattening out. And I remember the head of the Miller Lite brand team at Miller Lite said, we need to plan next year's business, and I'm thinking we're going to plan out -2%. Now, I'm the youngest person in the meeting, and I'm the most junior person at my company in this meeting. And I raised my hand, and I said, well, where's the group that's going to work on the +20% plan? I want to be in that group. I mean, I'm thinking, I didn't drive 4 hours to work on the -2% plan. That's not what I want to do with my life, right? But I carried this chart in my head ever since then. And anytime my business partner and I work on a piece of business, we work with clients, we're always thinking about what is that bridge that's going to get you and your business from here to there. And in order to answer that question, you've got to answer some other questions, which is primarily what's the vision? Where are we going? Right? If we're going to make changes, what are we changing to? And you can't get there if everything's going to be the same, right? If I've got the same people in the same positions doing the same strategies, I'm going to, by default, extend that 2% decline, right? And so, so the point of this chart is obviously what's the pivot? How do I create the delta to pivot the business forward in a positive way? But I got to pivot it in a clear direction. And when I give you two recent examples, both during COVID, that exemplify this and are just phenomenally successful. And there's a lot of, you guys are talking to a lot of people that are saying, hey, my business is so much better than before COVID, right? Some of it is happenstance. The two examples I'm going to give you are not. They're things that happen that people did to create success. So the first is Jack Stack, right? Jack Stack here in Kansas City. All of you remember going into Hen House less than 4 weeks after COVID locked down the city and noticing that all the salad bars were gone and they were replaced by Jack Stack barbecue to go in grocery stores. How did that happen? How did that happen so fast? And how did Jack Stack get the operations, the packaging, the distribution, the knowledge, the contacts, the sales, the business development to make all that happen so quickly, right? Well, they did a bunch of stuff here, but they figured out what we needed to do, and then they made it happen. And unbelievable to watch that. And then now, you've seen this over the past year, you go to any Jack Stack, and there's a business that's been built on the side of the business, which is their carry-out business. And cars are lined up every day to carry out business. Well, that needs training, that needs people, that needs technology, that needs packaging, that needs a customer journey path that's going to have them go home and get the barbecue that tastes the way it's supposed to inside the restaurant. So how they did that is just something to be in awe, but they did it, and they did it very quickly. And they took advantage of a situation that's just clobbering all these other restaurants, right? What did sit-down restaurants do? They eliminated tables. They cut back on their staff. But here's Jack Stack saying, hey, I'm going to make a pivot. I'm going to go into grocery, and I'm going to actually add a different type of restaurant, which is a carry-out restaurant next to my eat-in restaurant. So I was just really impressed with that. Another example is UPS. So Carol Tomei used to be the chief financial officer of Home Depot, but she was on the board of UPS. And UPS hired her as their newest CEO. The previous CEO had been there for quite a while. And she came into the business and she started creating something that looks like this, right? And she started making significant changes. The first thing she said was, hey, we're not going to have Amazon as a client anymore. We can't afford to have them as a client. So let's get out of that business. And she started raising prices. And one of the biggest changes she did was she said, in a polite way, hey, my previous CEO was building all these distribution centers around the country and then taking on all these unprofitable clients to keep the distribution centers busy. How crazy is that? So she started just refiguring their business model to get to a better place. Obviously, COVID, with everyone shipping, helped their business, but she was very clear. We need to get to a better place, not a bigger place. She changed their pricing strategy, their distribution strategy, their business model, and she was able to do that very quickly. And so that's an example, obviously, of a successful pivot. I saw this chart on LinkedIn, and I pulled it and I shared it with you because quite often when I was working in the fast food business, I worked on quite a few brands, and it's not all that difficult to spike your business, right? If you're having a soft first 2 weeks of February, there are ways you can have a very successful second 2 weeks in February and essentially spike your business. But what happens is when you do that too often, what happens is you spike your business on a downward trend. And so if you connect the dots on the trend line, which you can see here on the left, if you actually draw a line on the peaks and you draw a line in the valleys, you can see the business is trending down, even though it looks like it's spiking. But if I'm going to pivot my business, I'm thinking, hey, what am I doing going forward? And when I was the chief marketing officer of Beauty Brands and the chief marketing officer of Westlake Ace Hardware, I would intentionally have meetings with my team, and no one in the meeting was allowed to talk about anything other than past 9 months out. So, for example, if we were having the meeting today, we would be talking about first quarter of 2022. What are we going to do in the first quarter of 2022? And even that's really too short. I mean, I'm being in a retail business, you get accustomed to kind of thinking short term to your detriment, and then the business ends up working you versus you work the business. But I think the chart on the right gets you closer to this idea of how am I going to vision where I need to be. I had lunch yesterday with a client that my business partner and I have been trying to partner with for a while. We've partnered with them in a very casual way, sharing ideas and insights, but we haven't won them over as a client. But one of the things that this person told me during the COVID, it was very clear to them they'd had a big giant international client that went out of business. And they decided after they got on the other side of that client loss that they were no longer going to take public companies. And he stated it really clearly. He said, I'm going to only work with private companies, because he said, I'm not in the business of helping a procurement officer make their bonus. I'm in the business of helping my clients get their business to a better place. Wow, that's a vision, right? If you're bidding all your jobs on price, and the procurement officer is making a decision on who's the cheapest commodity, you're not going to win at that game. No one's going to win at that game other than the procurement officer. So I thought that was a great insight of both having a vision, but also being able to implement that. And he actually said his business had grown by 200% because of COVID, because they actually got out of the public sector business. So I teach strategy in the MBA programs at UMKC and KU, and one of the hardest things to teach non-strategic people is that strategy isn't additive, right? Everyone wants to grow their business by adding, and in reality, you grow your business by narrowing and focusing and have people come to you. A friend of mine talks about, do you want to hang your shingle out and be an attorney, or do you want to be an attorney for only men that have estates over $2 million that failed to sign a prenup and now they're going into a divorce? If your strategy is the second, people are going to find you. If your strategy is just an attorney, man, you're chasing every available lead, because you don't know who you are and you don't know why someone should buy from you other than, you're out hustling business.
I think that's a really good point right there that I would love to underline and put like, 3 exclamation points behind it, because that's one of the things that I've witnessed from watching people that did incredibly well during the pandemic and pivoting, is they identified the narrowest niche and then they doubled down on it. And, much like the Jack Stack example that you just shared.
Yeah, and you guys can see this in real life anytime you turn on a poker game on TV, right? At any time you turn a poker game on TV, someone has the most chips, and the announcer always says, this person who has the most chips is the person folding the most, right? It also explains when I play a game with my friends, I can win money in poker, but every time I go to Las Vegas, I'm staying in too long on hands that aren't going to win the pot. And what a horrible feeling it is at the end of the poker game to realize you've got the fourth best hand. You don't even have the second best hand. You got the fourth best hand, because you didn't decide what to do versus not to do. You just stayed in, and a lot happens with business a lot, right? You're just kind of inertia is not your friend, and yet inertia is preventing you from making the narrowing choices you need to make. So I also found this on LinkedIn. This gets kind of passed around every once in a while, and I have found this to be really true. A lot of the sales that I make, our company makes, are often conversations that we've been having for over multiple years with multiple people at the same company, following up, and winning both the emotional and the rational sale by getting close to and understanding the business in such a way where the prospect eventually can see what we see initially, and that is, wow, we can help. As my business partner says, well, I never really feel like I'm selling. I feel like I'm helping our clients, right?
Well, you're
And so this,
demonstrating the transformation,
yep,
and that's not something that takes place in one conversation.
yep, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of pieces to a sale, and one of the things that we discover all the time is that the initial conversation often is opening a lot of doors where you're actually finding what the real problem is, what the real barriers to success are, that allows you more to customize the solution that you have rather than just generically saying, geez, I'm a marketing consultant. Well, that doesn't say anything to anybody, right? That doesn't say anything to anybody at all. But this does say that obviously, and I agree with it, a lot of sales take place further down the sales funnel and not really at the top.
David,
Um,
have you
yeah,
have you seen the study that was done by HubSpot at the beginning of this year?
I did
That
not.
was actually it was actually going back and looking at each of these statistics post pandemic.
Uh-huh.
And it was fascinating because a lot of what you see here has it's even expanded a little bit further yet, just based on the amount of information and how people are going to digital. And it's just, I mean, a prime example of why making sure that marketing and sales truly are at the same table and not just ships passing in the night in terms of driving revenue.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we WiseWebs had a very successful 2020 was we had done a lot of business development work in 2017, 2018, 2019. And so we didn't start 2020 like at a stop sign with a blank sheet of paper. We had weeks and days and years of conversations with people. And some of those people were now ready to say, wow, because things are on pause right now, it's time for me to get a new website or a digital platform, or to think about technology that can really connect my operations, marketing, sales, and business development, or my business development strategy isn't really tight. And it's a good time right now for me to figure that out. And what these folks were saying is, it's time for me to pivot forward. Can you help us think through how to do that? Um, So I had a boss once who just used the same phrase over and over again. And when you're working for a boss who uses the same phrase over and over again, it annoys you. And then it annoys you even more when 20 years later, you're not working for that person and you're using that phrase that he used all the time. But he used to talk about angling the angles. And I thought that was a good way to describe both strategy and marketing and sales when you're trying to figure out, how do I change the delta? How do I create the delta? How do I pivot forward in a positive way? How do I upside the business without the downside risk? And in many cases, and what this picture is trying to illustrate is, it's not going through the front door. Maybe you go through the back door, maybe you come down the chimney, maybe you even go to and knock on a different house. But my business partner and I have had a lot of clients where the sales channel was wrong. The client's calling on CEOs, and the client actually needs to be the CFO. That's the only person bonused in the organization that is interested in money flowing to EBITDA and bonused on that. And so therefore, if what you're selling improves EBITDA, don't talk to the head of marketing. That's not where their bonus is. Don't talk to the head of operations. Talk to the CFO. And so, anyway, angling the angles is a way to just constantly think about your business in terms of, am I, using a hammer against a nail all the time? Is there other more creative ways I can think about my business? I wrote this article on LinkedIn, and it's published if you want to read it, but I combine this visual with what is the plan, and now I wrote this article on creating a winning game board, and this idea of, I think we all know this, but just to call it out, the people that are really successful in business and entrepreneurship and being a catalyst for growing their companies are people that can create a game board that they can win at, and they're not playing by the rules of someone else's game board. And I think that's so critical. And we're all in situations where we're kind of dealt a hand, but that doesn't mean that we have to just assume the boundaries and the rules and the framing is the same, right? I mean, the former CEO of UPS thought that he needed lots of distribution centers. Well, the new CEO came in and she didn't start with the assumption that I've got to keep all those distribution centers busy. The old CEO thought, wow, I need Amazon as a client. Amazon is the biggest retailer in the world. I need them as a client. Well, the new CEO came in and said, that's not a game board I want to play on because I'm gonna lose at that game. So creating a winning game board is figuring out, okay, am I first of all, am I starting on the right hopscotch square? And am I buying into assumptions that are actually hurting me? Right? McDonald's runs into this all the time. McDonald's, every day, someone at McDonald's wakes up and says, we should have a successful dinner business. McDonald's has never had a successful dinner business. People don't want to go to McDonald's for dinner. They go to McDonald's for breakfast. They go to McDonald's for lunch. They don't want to go to McDonald's for dinner. I spent 10 years of my life working on trying to make McDonald's dinner successful. It's not successful. They don't have success with salads either. People don't want to buy salads at McDonald's, right? But creating a winning game board for McDonald's means handheld portable sandwiches. When McDonald's says handheld portable, they deliver on convenience, they deliver on consistency, they deliver on hot and fast and inexpensive, and McDonald's does incredibly well at a game board that they created, right? Who invented the fast food breakfast business? Well, McDonald's did, right? And phenomenally successful at that. So I won't belabor it, but this is a frame of mind that I think gives you permission to just think, well, wait a minute, I don't need to, just because someone gave me this framework doesn't mean I need to be successful. And I'll couple this with something I try and teach my students. Back when I was a first-year entrepreneur and I was networking with a lot of experienced entrepreneurs, I met one person who really upset me. I left the coffee really upset. And I met with a former Kansas City Chiefs quarterback who had started a consulting business. And during the entire coffee, he told me about how much business he was going to get because he hung out his shingle and everyone knew him. And I realized, and I tried to find a polite way to tell him, look, the game isn't going to come to you, right? You may be Mr. Kansas City Chiefs quarterback, Mr. Popular. The game isn't going to come to you. You need to go create the game. You need to create the game that you're going to win at. And I think that's a really successful mindset. And it certainly allowed our business over the last 18 months of COVID to pivot. Right? We looked at different parts of our business. What were the margin performance? What was the satisfaction we were getting? What was the ability for us to help our clients in big ways and little ways? And there was a point in our business where we were doing, really large strategic projects, big technology projects, but we were creating these tails because it had kind of, annuity income. So we would have annuity income for lots of different projects like social media and things like that. And my business partner and I decided, well, maybe we don't want to be in the tail business. Maybe we really want to be in the helping the client business, which is it's good for our soul, but it's also where, we don't need a lot of employees and we don't need a lot of infrastructure and we don't need a lot of machine running. And so we created a different game board for ourselves over the past year, and that's been good for our soul, good for our business, and it's allowed us to pivot forward and get to a better place for us, but most importantly for our clients, right? We're focused on the big things that we can make an impact on, and that's really the business we're in. So sometime over the last year, I read, and I found this really fascinating, because if you think of COVID creating chaos, which it certainly has in industries like retail and restaurant, travel, hospitality, manufacturing, supply chain, right? Just go down the line, right? COVID has been a disruptor. Well, I came to discover that the Chinese symbol for chaos is actually made up of two symbols, and the two symbols comprise danger and opportunity. And if you think back to the examples of UPS, and you think back to the examples of Jackstack, and the example that I gave of my friend's business, who says he's up 200% over a year ago, finding opportunity where others are getting sidelined by danger is actually creating a game board you can win at. Here's a slogan that I share. It comes from the Marines. I think it's perfect for marketing. It's great for strategy. It's wonderful for entrepreneurs, but it certainly comes out of this idea of chaos. But the Marines would say, improvise, adapt, and overcome. And I think being nimble in your mind, being nimble in your ability to pivot, and looking for ways to get your business to a better place, your client's business to a better place, and anchor it in something that's purposeful, right? And not get distracted by, so many businesses get distracted by activity. We're going to do lots of stuff as opposed to having something purposeful. And I'll kind of leave you with this because I teach this in all my classes, and that is, if you understand your company's reason for being and how you're meeting your client's reason for need, it should be the same, right? If you're in the convenience business, your clients are looking for convenience. And so everything kind of starts with reason for being. So it's hard for you to figure out a vision, a strategy, and a plan that's going to get you to a better place. It's hard to actually make change decisions if you don't understand your reason for being. We had a large client a few years ago that hired us for a significant strategy assignment. This client was in the restaurant business, they were in the retail business, they were in grocery, they were they had a lot of an e-commerce business, and they were going to make some significant capital decisions going forward, and they wanted to kind of minimize the risk of making some bad decisions. And so we talked to their employees, we talked to customers, we did a huge in-depth study of the category, and we were able to give them direction and strategic advice because we understood what the reason for being was. And once you understand your reason for being, you can make very confident decisions, certainly capital-intensive confident decisions. You can make better hiring decisions, better communication decisions, if you know your reason for being. And going back to the poker analogy, it also allows you to say no to the people in the meeting that say, hey, we can do that too, right? That's the enemy of strategy. We can do that too, right? You keep doing more stuff and it takes your attention away from task at hand. A few years ago, the CEO of Pepsi got hauled into the board of directors, and they were very close to firing her because brand Pepsi had lost market share to Coke. And even though the CEO had grown, flavored waters and all sorts of ancillary drinks, the board was saying, look, don't take your eye off brand Pepsi. That's the cornerstone of our business. And if you come into work every day and you're in the we can do that too business, you end up with an additive mentality. And does the world need a diet cherry vanilla, no sugar Pepsi? No, the answer is no, right? Who thought that breakfast at Taco Bell was a good idea? Well, only the people at Taco Bell, right? Customers didn't think that was a good idea. I mean, they voted with their wallets.
That's a prime example. My kids they ended up buying some of this. I call it an abomination. It was Dr. Pepper that had diet, and it was cherry vanilla, and I couldn't imagine what the thinking was behind that whatsoever. So I actually have a couple of areas that I'd like to dive into and pick your brain if I can.
Please, absolutely.
And I think it will be helpful for the folks listening in on this conversation because you have certainly sparked a lot of thought. So if you go back in your presentation to where you identify that gap, can you
Uh-huh.
give me some of the, like, okay, that one right there. So when you identify that you are either plateaued or you're in a decline, what are some of the signs that tell you that it's time to really think about a pivot?
So if you're in retail, your average check is flat. Your customer visit frequency is declining. Your sales trend line is either flat or declining. Maybe you've been able to increase your profits by increasing your prices. Um, you've got new competitors that are coming into your space. Um, there's kind of this equation in business where I'm either getting new customers, and how much am I getting new customers? How long am I keeping those customers, and what's my drop off? And how healthy is my new customer acquisition and retention? But then once I get a customer, how successful am I growing the value of that? My business partner and I worked on an international charity a few years ago, and this charity would get a donor. Let's call that donor year 1 through 3, and that donor would make the requested donation on a monthly basis. And then as the donor got more knowledgeable of the charity, the donations increased, but also the personal involvement increased. And you could look at the business model, and by the time the donor had been with the organization by 12 to 15 years, the donations were significant, the personal investment was significant, oftentimes donating time and money, and the enthusiasm and the commitment was so much more. And so if you think that just as that as a model for whatever you're in, once I get a customer, am I growing the stickiness? Am I growing the commitment? Am I growing the engagement of the customer over time because my value proposition's strong? I'm meeting my customer's needs. I'm not focused on me. I'm focused on my customer. And I'm helping my customer be successful for the reasons why they came to me. So, Brendan, those
So
are the things that we look at is what if you had some, let's say you made something up called brand health. What's the health of the brand? What's the health of your business? What's the health of your customer base? One of the first calculations I made when I got to beauty brands was trying to understand. We were getting new customers every day. We had customers for a while. When they were losing customers, those customers in the middle that we had, what was their value? How happy were they? How long were they staying with us? What was their behavior? What did they buy from us? Did they use us for both services and products or just occasionally? So I think
a
there's a lot
point
of health metrics.
a point that you've made here that is huge. So, and I think you were going there with your metrics, but what I see a lot of entrepreneurs do in terms of making decisions about their strategy and direction and where they're going, it's all based on what new opportunities are coming in and lead flow. And a point that I hear you making, and one that I think that is of critical importance to anyone listening to this, is you focus on what you have first and you pay attention to those metrics, and that's the metric that is critical to the success of your business.
If we go back about 3, 4 years ago, my business partner and I talked to two different prospects, and the prospect's business was in some sort of uh, stagnancy, which is prompting a meeting with us. And so at some point in the meeting, we asked them, tell us about your best client. Who's the client that's using you the most or using you in the best way that reflects, it's kind of like your showcase client. And in both cases, the showcase client was actually the only client, and all the other business they did wasn't reflective of, wow, we're at our best when we're helping clients do this. So their value proposition, the reason for being, was really only coming through on one client. But interestingly enough, they treated that client very differently. Different teams assigned to it, different processes. It almost like they customized the company to the best client, which is great, but they didn't replicate it, and they didn't know how to go get other clients that modeled their best client, which was, by asking the question, that's, you're presuming that if you've got a little bit of success here, wow, how do I model that success? How do I go find people that look like our best clients, right? That's classic marketing is figuring out who is really driving your business, and then figuring out, wow, how do I go get more like that? So, but Brendan, in your comment, in your question, you're actually stating one of the key issues my business partner and I find in a lot of work we do with clients, and that is too much investment, too much emphasis in biz dev and lead generation, and really just craziness trying to chase leads and trying to chase opportunities rather than taking a core business and growing that business, right? There's actually two parts to it, right? Peter Drucker says, you need to get clients, but you need to grow clients. And so, the ROI you're going to get on a dollar spent on an existing client is always going to be higher. Let's take an example. Let's say you have a bookstore, and at your bookstore, you've got, 5% of your customers come twice a month, and they spend on the average of $50 every time they check out. So they're coming 24 times a year. What's the likelihood you could get them to come 30 times a year? Like 100%. 100%. It's like the easiest thing in the world to do in marketing is to get your heavy users to use you more, right?
It's the 80-20 rule.
Yeah. How hard is it to go find a new customer? It's like really hard, right? It's even harder if you don't know who you are, you don't know your value proposition, you don't know your reason for being, and you don't know your selling proposition, right? And you're just communicating a lot of stuff. We do quite a bit of work with nonprofits, and oftentimes the very first conversation we have with them is, boy, you get on your website and you're telling me the 15 reasons why you're great, and no one really has any understanding of what you do. Let's hunker down and find the one reason why most of your donors really love you and really connect with you, right? The same thing with business. A lot of B2B clients, we work with quite a few B2B clients, and B2B clients are always focused on biz dev. But they're not marketing people, right? They're not salespeople. B2B people oftentimes are the people building it, managing it, running it, organizing it. And when you ask them, hey, tell me about your business, they want to tell you the 20 things, which muddy the message, right? Why did you start this company? Why are you so great? Why am I going to use your product over someone else's, right? Let's narrow that conversation down, because I can't process you telling me how complicated it all is and all the arcane things about it that you know.
So with that, you've talked about identifying that, okay, here's the delta, you've recognized what it is. What are some of the things that we as entrepreneurs in small businesses can do to identify which option should we pivot towards?
So you want to pivot towards a combination of opportunity. I can tell you that most small business owners do a terrible job at doing a competitive analysis. A competitive analysis that's real, genuine, honest, and thorough, right? Because if you do a competitive analysis, you're going to understand your category better, why people buy, but why people come to the category, what are the benefits of the category, who's the category leader, who's the challengers in the category, and what's your role in the category. And your role in the category can't be, I'm going to be right on top of everyone else, right? Because everyone else is already there, and you're just, you're just creating a
You're
game
a
board.
crowd. You're in
Yeah,
a crowd.
you're creating a game board where you're going to lose. I'll tell you, one of the things that my business partner and I do that is so successful with clients is we'll create a matrix of strategic initiatives, and we'll organize it by risk and we'll organize it by cost. Let's call it risk impact. And so if you're thinking let's go ahead for 2022, each of you, if you're thinking about, boy, here's some of the 5 strategies I'm thinking about for 2022, and you just start to organize them by how hard they are to implement, the impact they're going to have on the business, the risk of them, being successful or not, and the cost to implement. You're gonna organize them roughly into 4 buckets, and there's going to be a bucket which is low risk, high immediate impact. And Brendan, to your question, if all those initiatives are aligned to your vision, then all of a sudden you've got a good place to start. Things that are low risk, things that can have a big impact right away, and things you can start tomorrow, right? You mentioned the word strategy, and a lot of senior teams and business owners, they start to put things in the too hard pile very quickly, where really strategy is really just answering the what question. What am I going to do, right? And if my
And
strategy
getting
is,
started doing it.
yeah, like starting tomorrow, let's say, regardless of what business you're in, starting tomorrow, well, I'll give you an example. So my business partner and I were talking to someone the other day who had created a really incredible analytic tool, and he was out kind of selling it to low end, low price, commodity interested potential clients. And yet he was in a category which was incredibly competitive. There were giant worldwide players that owned, hundreds and hundreds of outlets. And it was very easy for us to say, well, why don't you call on the CEOs of like the top 5 companies? Because it's not unreasonable to think, wow, between now and the end of the year, if you focused on the top 6 leaders in the category as potential clients of yours, you're going to get meetings with at least 3 of them. You might sell one of them, and that one of them is going to generate, hundreds of times the income that going and selling on price would have. So that's a strategy, right? The strategy, what am I going to do is the strategy. And then putting the plan together. We've had a lot of success putting together implementation plans that really bring to life the business, the way to make it happen.
Fantastic. Thanks for expanding that. So,
Yeah, I
okay.
wanted to also too. I just want to call out. I've been kind of referring to my business partner, Terry Jordan, the founder and CEO of WiseWebs. She and I met at UMKC about 5.5 years ago, and she had a successful business before I met her. I was kind of mucking around the marketing consulting world, and we started working together, helping clients both with technology and marketing, and really got into growing their strategic paths through a combination of what we do. But everything I've said today is, in a large part, she and I trying to, do this for ourselves, figuring out what our pivot is, what our vision is, and helping clients in a bigger way.
Well, and I think you also bring up a really good point just with that example right there of you aligned with Terry. That's the thing that I think is so critically important with businesses. I find the ones that were incredibly successful during the pandemic, much like Kathy, who joined our call early, her successful pivot was tied to finding an amazing relationship with a referral partner that they have now expanded, and it's going to some pretty incredible places. So I think that finding people that you can align with and collaborating rather than trying to do it alone is so just critically important. Not to mention, it's a lot more fun and a lot less lonely. So,
Well, we have very different skill sets. I'm a marketing person, and my business partner is very much a strategic thinker. She comes from categories very different than I came from, and so we complement each other in the categories that we both bring to the party, as well as she has incredible discipline, where I'm more loose in my thinking, and we kind of complement each other.
that's fantastic. Well, Terry, I am so glad you joined us today as well. I would attempt to unmute you, but then I'm just probably going to be embarrassed because my system isn't going to cooperate as well as I hoped it would. So, okay. Well, I will wrap us up because we have learned some, I think, really great insight from David today. And these lessons that he has shared with us don't just apply to pandemic marketing and pivoting from a pandemic. These are strategies that you need to incorporate into your business each and every day. And one thing that I also do recommend that you connect with David on LinkedIn. He shares fantastic content. I really enjoy following and listening to the conversations that he's having on social media. He also hosts a boot camp called the High Performance Marketing Boot Camp. And when we had breakfast the other day, he was threatening to put another one of those on that I certainly think we should all take advantage of should the opportunity arise. And how he does it that's a little bit different is he pulls a number of thought leaders around specific topics together, and it basically becomes an all-day immersion event into all things high performance marketing. And it is specifically designed for people that have marketing at heart. And it is about people that are trying to accomplish some really big strategic goals. And he provides you with here are some of the avenues that you can follow a proven path that others have done, as well as I'm going to show you the people that are doing it. So it's pretty amazing. So I do suggest that you connect with him and stay tuned for when that shows up. So thank you so much today, David. I really appreciate the effort that you've put into this presentation. And I encourage you all to seek him out and connect.
Awesome. Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. And remember to get what you want. You have got to help others get what they want. Have a great day, and I wish you all good selling.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendan.
Okay, so I'll clip the recording right there. Does anybody have any questions for David before we wrap up? Because I wanted to have some time for Q&A. It's been fun. I've been having several other conversations during this. It's been kind of fun. You brought some great guests to the table today as well, David. Thank you so much for inviting some fantastic new people.
Awesome.
All right. Let me see. Any questions? All right. Cynthia, are you still here? She had a question that I couldn't understand.
Okay.
All right. So I am going to hopefully unmute you. I'm giving it a go. Okay. You are now unmuted on my end, but it may require that you do a lot of happy clicking in order to get it to work. But could you chat in what your question was, or use the questions pane in order to do that? And I will undock it so that I can actually see it expanded. Let's see. Do I still have Cynthia? Okay. I'm not seeing it. Well, how about we do this? How about you share your lesson learned? What have you picked out based on our conversation today that you are going to incorporate in your business with the Start Tomorrow strategy? Okay, and David, you are still sharing your screen
Okay.
also. Okay, so you mentioned growing the value. Can you expand? Now,
Yeah.
was that
Yeah. So every business should be able to understand the different value of different customers. They may not have the sophisticated metrics, but I'll give you an example. I got to beauty brands and I didn't have a database, but I went around to each of my store managers and I said, who's our best customers, the top 2 customers in each store? And every store manager knew who they were. And I was able to invite them, because we were sponsoring Starlight at the time, I was able to invite them to Starlight for like a kind of a thank you. So the value really gets to what's the value of a customer, and how do you discriminate within your database to find who the most valuable customers are, and then understanding why they're different, how they use you differently. I mean, like when I was in the hardware business, older customers that had older homes in older neighborhoods, they're perfect for a hardware store. There's nothing but problems that cause them to go to the hardware store each week. And if we had a store like we did near some apartment complexes, some crazy person decided that's where we should have a hardware store, but it didn't come out of someone who understood the customer database.
Yeah, that one would not make much sense.
No, not at all.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, David, I appreciate you taking time. And it's been a lot of fun. And I always enjoy learning from you and gaining very specific, actionable intelligence that I wish more people would think about their business like this. I think that entrepreneurs, we have a tendency to get super excited about chasing whatever is shiny and new and exciting. And lead generation and all things related to top of funnel have a tendency to get exciting, but we forget the most critical aspects of our business, which is what we already have and the people that already know us and love us and use us.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right. Well, I hope everybody has an absolutely fantastic weekend, and I encourage you to drink lots of water. Stay hydrated. Holy cow. This is going to be a hot one, at least for the rest of today, and hopefully things are going to shift just a bit and we'll be able to enjoy some decent and not dog days of summer.
Yeah.
All right. Take
Awesome.
care,
Thanks, Brandy.
everybody.